Rupert Holmes now has written the music for a new stage production in Central Park. It is called The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Before we talk to Mr. Holmes, here's a little of that music. Listen. Welcome to Live at 5, Rupert.
Nice to be back. It's good.
This is not the Pina Colada song. This
no, that's didn't sound at all like any, not even a daiquiri in there. No,
nothing going there.
That's one of the more operatic moments from the show. There's a lot of up-tempo stuff as well.
It's based loosely on the Charles Dickens work.
Right, loosely is the word, so that Dickens' ghost doesn't come back to haunt me for the next 10 years or something. It's an amazing work. Charles Dickens set out to write the greatest mystery story of all time, and halfway through it, he died, and he left no clues whatsoever as to how he intended to end it. But now we're ending it in our own way, in league with the audience every night in Central Park. They get to vote on all the major issues of the story, and that determines a different outcome each night.
How does a guy who has a #1 rock and roll and popular record wind up writing 32 songs and adapting a half-finished Charles Dickens book into a Shakespeare in the Park musical that might go to the Broadways? I mean, that's bizarre.
It is bizarre. I guess I stayed at Woodstock one day too long or something like that. It had an effect on my brain.
What takes place in The Mystery of Edwin Drood isn't exactly what it seems, but it definitely is a play within a play. And it stars Cleo Lane, George Rose, and Betty Buckley, who as an English music hall actress fills 2 additional roles, both as a man, the mysterious Dick Datchery and the title character Edwin Drood. This requires more than a few wardrobe changes and gets, as you might expect, a bit confusing.
They changed my wig to the Miss Nutting wig, but then I had to put my bowler hat on and go and pretend to be Drood. I looked in the mirror and said to my dresser, I said, "Do I have on my earrings in this scene or what?" And she goes, "No, you're Drood." And I went, oh, yes, you're right.
That Charles Dickens did not live to finish the novel that this musical is based on didn't discourage the show's creator, Rupert Holmes. In fact, he's come up with 7 alternate endings, leaving it to an audience vote to decide who did what to whom.
Let's bring up the house lights and we'll proceed with the voting.
A majority of hands decides who committed murder, and from there the story continues, given the audience's preferred ending.
I killed him when I meant to kill you, Jasper.
There's also a vote to decide the secret identity of one key character and to choose which pair of actors ends up in love.
Which of these 2 ladies would you like to see united in love with one of our remaining male leads? Pray indicate by your applause.
And for the performers, all this means being prepared for a quick change of plot or else.
The other night I was chosen as the murderer, and they didn't tell me until the very last minute, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know that song.
And for those members of the cast voted out of the action, it can get a bit discouraging.
People are trying to figure out why they're not getting voted for in certain sections, and I go around and say to them, I know, I have the answer, you know, and they say, what? And I say, if you'll go get me lemonade, I'll tell you.
Audiences are very intelligent. They always want to vote for the least likely person. So one of the things I'm working on is making sure that everyone seems like a least likely person.
Barbara Hauer, Entertainment Tonight.
You survive when you think of every risk we face in our mad human race. I have read the writing on the wall. Try to live forever and give up never. Survive your...
Tomorrow, get set for a visit by the Beach Boys as they celebrate 25 years together. Catch them on E.T. tomorrow night at 7:30. Now stay tuned for rock and roll summer action next on ABC.
Mr. Cunningham. Why are you looking at Mr. Dickens in the park?
Oh, I do have an... Gee, Jim, I'm so glad you asked that question. I do have an answer. Let me explain this. There is a theater behind me here, the Delacorte Theater, and in about an hour, as it has happened each August night so far, the spirit of Charles Dickens will fill that theater. Now, you know and I know, we all know that Charles Dickens was a 19th century novelist, that in fact he never wrote anything for the stage, but he has and continues to have a remarkable success in the theater. The hit musical Oliver, based on Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, is but one striking example of Mr. Dickens gliding successfully from the page to the stage. The saga of Nicholas Nickleby, presented by England's Royal Shakespeare Company, is yet another. And now, each August night, the New York Shakespeare Festival presents the very latest in Charles Dickens as theater, a new musical version of The Mystery of Edwin Drood. What makes The Mystery of Edwin Drood such a fascinating piece of Charles Dickens as theater is that Charles Dickens never finished the novel.
And so, my dear friends, this is all we shall ever know for sure of the mystery of Edwin Drood.
Ah, but the stage play is more than ready to finish it for him, with the full cooperation of the audience. For 30 years now, people have stood online in Central Park of a late summer afternoon waiting for their free tickets for whatever the festival had to offer. But this is the first time in 30 years that a ticket provided not only free admission to a play, but a vote in just how that play turns out.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are left with these remaining characters for the role of murderer.
Actually, the audience votes on a number of issues, but the most critical issue is whodunit.
One, Helena Lovelace!
Who killed Edwin Drood? Was it John Jasper, or Princess Puffer, or Rosebud, or the Reverend Chris Sparkle?
Did I in some way confuse my mission here on Earth?
This particular night, the audience pointed the fatal finger at Rosebud. But in fact, the company is ready to conclude the play any way the audience decides, and the audience, for its part, is always bound to depart in a happy sort of tizzy.
I didn't vote for any of the murderers.
I forgot their name. What's it? It's been different every night, and it makes the show worth coming back for, because it is a totally different tale.
And no matter who done it, the play is not simply a free Midsummer Night's Delight, it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After all, when again will you get the chance to finish what Charles Dickens started? All right, everybody. Oh, you don't know the lyrics. Well, anyway, there is some talk in the air. I understand that this show just might go to Broadway. That's in the future. That's a possibility. But you know what Broadway tickets cost. Right now, you can see it each night in Central Park until September 1st, absolutely free. And incidentally, the reason the Edwin Drood was never finished is that Charles Dickens died. These people will go in about an hour, decide just who killed Edwin Drood. Jim, back to you.
Edwin Drood has been murdered, and near the end of the show, with the suspects lined up on stage, the audience votes on whodunit. And I was tempted to cast a write-in ballot for Joseph Papp. For while there's much to admire here, including a sensational cast, the show doesn't quite make it. And producer Papp should have demanded revisions to tighten and sharpen it. The setting is an old British music hall where a touring company is performing a musical version of Edwin Drood. It's the one about a closet opium fiend who's in lust with a fair maiden who's engaged to young Drood who's done in. It's performed with the leers and grimaces of campy Victorian melodrama. Now, Papp and director Wilfrid Leach successfully hooked up the Pirates of Penzance, but that show had the solid foundation of the glorious Gilbert and Sullivan score. Drood has book music and lyrics by pop composer Rupert Holmes, and in his theater debut, his work lacks focus. It has moments, but it is not forceful enough to make you hiss the villain or cheer the hero or care much how the audience votes to end it. The music is also hit and miss. A couple of ballads are gorgeous, and jazz singer Cleo Lane, delivering them, steals the show as the matron of an opium den. But other tunes, like this patter song, fall flat.
Company 12 to a shilling, twice that to a florin, and would you not fancy the currency foreign to fantasy face on both sides of the coin? Barbish around from pennies to guineas, the two-sided cases, the roll not exception, and would you not feel better through a deception, the fantasy face on both sides of the coin?
Sorry, but unlike Gilbert and Sullivan, I just couldn't understand those lyrics. Choreographer Graciela Danielle creates a sinuously delightful opium hallucination number, and the excellent performers include Betty Buckley, Patty Cohenor, Larry Shue, Janice Schneider, and as the manager of the acting company, displaying his usual flair, George Rose.
Please feel free to be as vulgar and uncivilized as you wish, provided you keep purchasing drinks at the bar here over by the musician's tent.
So, some fun here, and the admission is free. But if Joe Papp plans to move Edwin Drood to Broadway at $40 or so a ticket, he and his colleagues must go back and polish this promising but rough show. And they'll have to work like the Dickens.
The Mystery of Edwin Drood has a Rupert Holmes score I would have given last year's Tony to. Wonderful choreography, big stars, you hiss the villain, cheer the hero. I haven't had this much fun in Central Park since, well, that's a little personal.
I've come to town, my ear at every door.
And it's Shakespeare in the park, and that means it's free. Okay, so it's Dickens in the park, but that is Betty Buckley as Edwin and Cleo Lane in a British fro. What great voices, what a great cast, what great fun. Done as a play within a play by a properly seedy British music hall company. The plot is Dickens, but the jokes are Chaucer. The music hall asides are fun, though they do slow us down until right here. At this very point, he'd introduced the characters, set the plot in motion, and then Charles Dickens died. He never finished the book. So what happens? The audience votes on it for real. Who falls in love? Who murdered Edwin Drood? They must have written a dozen endings, rewritten a dozen songs. It's like playing Clue with a 15-piece band and a Broadway score. One last mystery. Why open the show the end of August when it has to close when the weather turns? Two possible solutions: extend summer until February, or take this show inside. It's that good.